Coaches and athletic directors, it's Corbin Smith with MTTS Sports Group. Let me ask you a quick question. What are the biggest challenges that you face when it comes to leadership development and culture sustainability? At MTTS Sports Group, we have created a system through leadership speaking and training, staff alignment seminars, as well as culture seminars that address those issues. We also offer a 6-hour fully immersive leadership stress test for your teams called the Tour Crucible. If you are interested at all, go to www.mttsportsgroup.com and let us know how we can help. Enjoy the podcast. Good. Good. Well, let me go ahead and introduce you, DC. So DeMontie Cross, um, this is weird for me to, but new head football coach at Lee Summit North high school in Missouri. It's in Missouri, right?
Yes.
Still in Missouri?
Yes, it's on
Okay,
the
I
Missouri
didn't.
side.
It's in Kansas City, so
Yeah.
they got all these. But congratulations, man.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Honored and glad to one, see you and catch up. But yeah, I'm excited for the next phase of my coaching journey.
Good. Well, let me give a little background. So DeMontie was an all Big 12, Big 8 before they went Big 12 safety at the University of Missouri. He was a senior my first year as a graduate assistant coach, and John Hoke was a DB coach, and DC you were a senior, and I was fresh. I mean, I think we were probably the same. How old are you?
Mhm. I'm
How old are
52.
you now?
52.
Okay, so I'm
Yeah.
53, but we're the
Yeah.
same age. So I
Yeah.
just graduated. I was a young buck. DeMontie and I were really close, and DeMontie, DC, you were very intense, and I'll tell that story in a second. But I mean, your coaching career. I mean, Missouri defensive coordinator, TCU, DC. You coached for the Bills. I mean, you've kind of done it all, and
Yeah.
you have some kids and
Yeah.
married and living in Kansas City. But real quick, I want to tell this story, and I'm sure you'll remember it. But first game of the year, we were playing Eastern Michigan, and Mo Ankney was our defense coordinator. Now, a little backstory: Mo Ankney was my dad's best friend, so I had known Coach Ankney since I was probably 2 or 3, and so he was like another father figure to me. So, um, one of the first times as a GA in the defensive staff room, people were going out. I don't know what we were talking about, but I was over in the corner as a GA, and I spoke up, and Mo looked at me and he said, "Corby," he said, "you just sit there and shut up and don't say a word. You're a GA. You just learn." And I kind of real quickly got put in my place.
Yeah.
But the first game of the year, Eastern Michigan, and some things are going on, and I'm on the field with the headset directly to Mo, who's in the box, and he's asking me all these questions. You're off on the sidelines. And so I'm asking you, and you're telling me, and you're pissed off, and we're kind of going back and forth, and Mo, and finally, and I don't know if you know this, but Mo ripped my ass.
Yeah.
"Corby, stop talking to him and put him on the damn headset." And then you wouldn't take the headset. And I'm like, "Coach, you want put him on the headset." So I finally got you to get on the headset. But
Yeah.
those were some days, man. We had some good
Yeah,
times.
yeah. My juices ran hot back then. Like you said, just being the competitive guy I was, being later in my career, thinking I had it all figured out. I was tough to deal with, but for some reason we had a connection and I could listen to you at times and knew you were coming from a good place. And so I think that's where we kind of hit it off at, to
Yeah.
be honest with you. But yeah, I was difficult to deal with because I just felt like I had um, so much on me to be successful, and
Right.
I just wanted to be the best in my craft, and I took a lot of pride in it.
Yeah. Before I get in, because you
Yeah,
said and we all did, we all thought we knew it all.
yeah,
Back when we were young. But a little bit of background, because you're from St. Louis originally.
yeah,
Um, and back then, people don't know this. When my dad got there in '94, you were already there, obviously, going into your junior year. But um, St. Louis and the University of Missouri had this contentious uh I don't want to say relationship, but just there was the area of St. Louis felt like the University of Missouri, as far as I don't know if it was full athletics, but football
Mhm.
really didn't do its due diligence in the community to keep kids,
Yeah,
specifically the black community,
for
right?
sure. Yeah.
And so I know when my dad got there, like he fought that for the first 3 or 4 years. And you were, Donnell Jones, I remember being there
Mhm.
too. He was from
Yeah,
St. Louis. Ernest
yeah.
Blackwell was from St. Louis, but we didn't have enough guys from St. Louis and that
Mhm.
highly recruited area. You grew up in St. Louis. What made you want to go to Missouri? And then did you always know that you were going to coach?
I did not. Definitely. I definitely didn't know I was going to coach. And I was one of those kids who grew up uh, being told that Mizzou wasn't a good place for black athletes.
Yeah,
That was kind of the mantra of the city on the talk shows. There were different people who would put that image and message out there. And so, being a young kid, no male figures, no dad, nobody like that to really coach you up on what those things meant. You just leaned on the society and the environment. And so for me, I originally didn't go to Mizzou out of high school. I actually went to the University of Illinois. And so I
yeah,
spent a season there. And then I was like, okay, this not working out over here. Transferred back with the old staff, which was Bob Stoll, and so I'm thinking, okay, I'm back where I need to be because it came down to Mizzou and Illinois. Well, go through that season, Bob Stowe gets fired, and here comes Larry Smith. And I'm like, man, this ain't gonna work. Like I didn't even know him. I didn't know anybody. I just knew to have a third coach in 2 years, I just didn't feel good about it. And so I struggled my first couple years. Now I struggled my first few months because I just didn't feel like I was getting a fair shot. And I think knowing what I know now in coaching, all things being equal, you're going to give the older senior type players the first opportunity to play. And we had some seniors that were okay players, but I didn't think they were better than me. And
right.
so I just had to be patient, wait my turn. And that was difficult for me. But speaking of your dad, Coach Smith, I mean, he was the only man in that 2.5, 3 year bout that actually was able to grab my attention because I was just anti males. I didn't want anything to do with them. I felt like everybody was a liar. I didn't trust anybody. And Larry was probably the first person that just looked me in the face and said, "Hey, like, calm down. Like, I'm not against you, and give me a chance." And I think that was the first snippet of me letting my guard down, and from that point on, I had a special bond with Coach, and
Yeah,
it
yeah, you
just
did.
it propelled me to my manhood and to my growth. And without him, I'm being honest, I just don't know where I would be. I think he was the first male figure to reach me at an age where I was between those 18 to 20, where I was like, okay, maybe I can trust, maybe I can let my guard down a little bit. So that's the backstory on that. And then after my career was over, he was the one that said, "Hey, you ever think about coaching?" And then we could get into that too, but changed my life forever.
Do you think it helped? Because I probably I don't know if you know all this, but when you were there, do you think it helped build a bond with him because of the fact that he had been at SC? He was extremely close to Willie McGinnis. He was extremely close to Curtis Conway. He was extremely close to, I mean, I remember during the Rodney King riots, I
Mhm.
stayed down on campus with my buddy. I actually went to the beach with him. He brought a Suburban down and picked up Willie, picked up Curtis, picked up Alec Mahone, Dwight McFadden, who was from Oklahoma, Lamont Hollenquist, a couple of the kids
Mhm.
that grew up where this rioting was happening, and they stayed at his house for, a week. But do you think his ability to connect with you, I mean, did you realize it at the time how close and instrumental he was in those men's lives, considering they came from a similar background that you did in the culture and that kind of stuff?
You you know, at the time, no, but because in St. Louis, it was just such a small circle, we didn't know really what was outside our city limits, like, you
Right.
don't have the exposure that you do now, so I didn't know that until kinda later in my playing career. I'm like, "Oh, okay, SC," like, it never hit me when he was hired that he was an SC, an Arizona coach. It never really dawned on me. I probably knew more about the Arizona trip because of the desert was it Desert Storm or Swarm?
Desert
I kinda
Storm,
knew
yeah.
I know a little more about that than I did all the SC players, but as I got later in my career, playing career, I was like, "Oh," it kinda hit me like, "Okay, this guy's a real guy." And then, like I said, just the personal time that he invested in and didn't allow me to, um resist or didn't allow me to buck, right? He just didn't
Right,
allow
right.
it. And he had patience for me to understand probably why I was so tense or so something. He had the patience and that was the difference. He had the patience and I felt it was genuine and authentic and it showed well after my playing career.
Yeah. So how do you translate and what do you take from your own experience as a player and specifically that situation with a coach? Because I know you were close with Hope too,
Yeah.
with John.
Yeah.
And so how do you take what you learned as a player and implement it as and I know you're a head coach and we were talking off air and I kind of want you to reiterate the fact that you're a new head coach and you've always been an assistant at the highest levels, um, how do you implement what you learned with the kids that are anywhere from 14 to 18 years old? Because they're
Yeah.
not 18 to 22, and there's a huge difference.
Huge difference, different time. Again, exposure to so many different things that we weren't exposed to back in the day. I just think a lot of it is the patience part of it. You could still be intense to a degree, but I think you have to really reach the players where they are. It's our job not to allow them to stay where they are, but you have to find a way to go reach them where they are and then expose them to what else is out there, what else is possible. But I think too many times, I think coaches don't want to reach kids where they are. I think, especially the higher levels that you go up to, it's more about, hey, I need you to be great now. I need you to be perfect now. And a lot of times, we have to allow them to fail and fall on their face, but you have
Uh-huh.
to, and again, be willing to reach them where they are. And I had a situation with a young man. I hadn't been on this job, but for a couple of months, but I was able to have a conversation with a young man because he didn't have a ride home after school, after workouts one day. And I just sat there with him till his ride came. And I finally just kind of leaned in and started talking to him. Well, hell, I didn't realize that, because he had been a funny guy for the over the first few weeks. He was a funny guy. And I'm like, this guy's funny, but after sharing a conversation with him, he told me he does that to hide some of the things that he's sad about. Brother, 24 kill, another brother serving time in jail for killing someone, six other siblings, from another set of parents, and he's just felt like the weight of the world is on him and having not really talked to him or spend that time when I would have never known that about that young man. I would have just
Right.
got to know him a little bit, but it's just about, leaning in and realizing that it's a lot more than just the X's and O's, wins and losses. And it's about having the impact on young people at every moment that you can. You need to be of impact. And so I've tried to
Yeah.
lead my coaching career in that way at all my levels. And it's blessed me.
I go back and I want to ask you,
Hmm.
some ways that you lean in to those kids and because there's a lot of new head coaches out there and even older head coaches that have been
Yes.
doing it for a while and often forget. But it's so important, and I know and I've told this story on here many times before, but I know as a young graduate assistant coach, I mean, you called me by my first name. Bo called me by my first name. When I got hired as a tight ends coach, the majority of that room called me by my first name. And then what would happen is these younger kids, these freshmen would come in and they'd hear you guys call me by my first name and they thought they could call me by my first name. And so I got to the point where I'd just walk by them when they'd be like, "Hey, Corby,"
Absolutely.
I'd walk by them and I wouldn't say anything. And they finally figured out, okay, this is coach. And the difference for me was that you guys called me by my first name, but when we were on the field or in the meeting room, you you respected me as a GA or as a position coach later on. Um, but it was super important, and that was really hard for me because, like you said, I always wanted to lean into every person I ever coached and really get to know them and get to know how they work and how they operate and where they
Mhm.
came from and what their history is and what kind of culture they grew up in and all that kind of stuff. So what are some ways some coaches can, that you think are important that you're trying to do and that you've told your staff to do to really lean in and make it more about, wins and losses?
Yeah. I think first, I think it has to come from the other coaches. I try to make sure I address all of my coaches as coach in front of the
Right.
kids. I just make it a habit. And then if I hear a coach address a coach by a first name, I try to correct it, even if the coach doesn't. I'm like, hey, that's coach. I just try to make sure that the title of coach still holds the weight that it should always hold. And so I think about, those times I had to go through it myself. If you recall a little bit, when I became a GA,
Yeah.
I was a GA with all of my teammates. So I never
Mhm.
had the separation. I went right into it. So even to harp up on them, like, hey man, I'm coach, that was hard because of the relationships that I had with them being a player and not having any time away from them. And so even though I would, some of those guys could call me DC or some of that, I wouldn't allow those other guys that didn't know me at that level to address me as such. So I just think a lot of it is kind of how you view yourself, and then kind of how the rest of the coaches treat you if you're a younger coach. I just think we have to get back to the bare basic of what a coach
Right.
is. And it's not just for the show or the posts or the tweets or the Instagrams. It's more about what I believe a coach should be, and that's a mentor and always trying to develop the person as a whole, not just as an athlete.
Right. I mean, it's much like it's to me, it was always, now I understand how my dad had such a hard time separating being a coach and being a dad, right? Because quite honestly, um, as a coach, all your kids are your kids, right? All your
Yes,
players are your kids.
absolutely.
And as a father, it's the same way. I mean, we don't treat the players any differently expectation wise and standards wise than we do our own children. And that's a hard thing to do, but like you said, that coach allows that distinction of, listen, it comes with weight. It doesn't define who I am, but you always have to have respect for that word,
Yes.
much like being a father, right? Like, I'm
Yeah.
not your friend first. I'm your
Yeah.
dad first,
Hell
and we can be
yes.
friends later. I'm your coach first. Uh, well, that's good. Again, what are some things, because we kinda talked about this too off air, but,
Uh-huh.
you started to get into how different it was because you've always been an assistant or a coordinator, um,
Yeah.
and even at the high school level, like, it's being a head coach is being a first-time parent, right? Like, people try and prepare you for it, but we haven't lived it until you've lived it, and
Till you
so.
lived it.
Right. So you're in it now, as a head coach, as the head coach.
Yeah.
What are you finding are the biggest differences? And you mentioned you were always kind of protected. What are the things that you didn't expect that other assistant coaches that are listening can, if they want to be head coaches, can expect, can prepare for the best they can?
Yeah.
And what are some of the things you're doing to figure it out?
Well, I think, a lot of it for me in my first experience at this thing as a head coach, I tried to lay down expectations with parents. I had a team meeting, but I had a player meeting first, and then I had uh, a whole meeting with the parents and the kids in the same room, but I wanted to make sure I met the kids first before the parents. But in that meeting, I tried to establish with the group expectations, certain things that are non-negotiable, uh, and then probably the number one thing that all parents are concerned about, playing time, right? Everybody wants their kid to be a starter or a power forward player. I try to lay down what those expectations are going to be within my program, from recruiting standpoint, but also from how we treat our players and what we expect our players to be. And even when you lay down those fundamental things, there still is going to be some outliers, right? They still want to have it their way. They used to what the old staff did. You're never doing enough for their kid in recruiting. And even with all my years of coaching at the Power Four level, right? It still goes in one ear and out the other. And so I've just had to have a little more patience and try to again stick to what I shared with the parents in the first meeting about recruiting, um, workouts, training, all the different again recruiting services, 7-on-7 teams, all these different things that um, really don't help, in my personal opinion, as far as getting you recruited. It's still about what you put on tape, and what your development is from game to game or season to season. But you still got some people who listen to street agents, recruiting services, and they think they can chase the Power Four opportunity versus develop their skills to become a Power Four player.
Right,
It's just
right.
it's just, it's two opposite ends of the spectrum. So I just had to learn how to be a little more patient, and be willing to engage in some conversations that as an assistant I didn't have to engage in. But it's the parents for me. I think the parents, um, they're just more involved. There's more
Yeah.
investment, and I think the expectations are lopsided with that investment and involvement. They're just lopsided, and it's typically not in the athlete's favor.
Right. Well, I think, and we talked about this. I was telling you about you know, and people trying to come at me from recruiting services to try and I just don't believe in that. When
Yeah.
someone promises exposure and evaluation, it's not true. And
Yes.
that's why I'm doing the athlete mentorship to be able to work with their high school coaches to be an extension of what you guys are doing and telling them. What do you feel like your biggest role? Talk to parents out there. What is a head high school coach's job when it comes to recruiting? Because I think parents hear it from their coach and they don't believe it because there's
Yeah.
so much outside noise and there's so much promise. People are promising all these things that are just out and out lies. There's seven
Yes.
on seven coaches and recruiting services. They're not going to get you recruited.
No.
So what expectations do you lay for the parents, and what should parents expect from their high school coach?
Well, the expectations that I try to lay out is that the landscape of recruiting has changed. When you start dealing with NIL and the type of money that's involved now, most of the not just Power Four coaches anymore, most of the coaches now are not taking developmental players. Like when I came out, or even 10 years ago, you could take a 6'8" offensive lineman and sign him if he had any ability, and try to develop him for a couple years and then maybe get 2 years out of him, right? Maybe. That's not happening anymore. They want someone at the Power Four level that's ready made, because they don't have that developmental window anymore. And so I try to lay that out to parents to say that your end goal can still be Power Four, but you may have to go to a FCS, or you may have to go to a junior. You can still get there ultimately, but to think that developmental or just average football players in high school are going to be Power Four players, that window and opportunity has shrunk tremendously. So I don't think that parents really grasp that concept, because they see Joe Schmo get an opportunity and not look at their kids' development or their kids' measurables or their kids' a path, right? And so I just think I try to lay out that expectation and say that it's just different. We can end up there, but it just may be a different journey for you to get there. So that's one way. I just think for
Yeah, I
Mhm.
just I interrupt you real quick because I
For
know,
sure.
when you and I were at the college level, I mean, you were doing it a lot longer than I was, and way more recently. But it used to be where if you had 25 scholars, the max scholarships you could give a year at a Division I school was 25.
Yes.
And that didn't always mean that you had 25 to give. Sometimes years you'd have 22, 23. But 90% of those scholarships were being given to high school kids,
Yes.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
you would take a transfer, you take a JUCO kid, maybe a couple. It's between 80 and 90% were being given to high school kids. So that equates to 22, anywhere from 20 to 22 kids out of 25 were going to high schools. And now that's down to 6, 7, or 8 that are going
That's
to high
it.
school. And like you said, those 6, 7, or 8 aren't developmental kids. They're kids that they can plug and play right now, or at least be a backup right now. And so I know the last couple of years of coaching, I would tell parents all the time, and when I met with them, when I'd have our parent meeting individually, whatever, and I tell the kids, like, if you want to go play, if you want to play at the FBS level, I'm telling you right now that, are you good enough? In my opinion, yes. Are you going to get got right now? No, because of that scenario, right? And so what you need to do is, and I mean, we were both
Mhm.
transfers, right, in
Mhm.
college, and we had to sit out our year. And I
Yes.
hate, I hate to use it, but it's like you said, times have changed. So if a kid wants to play at a certain level and they're not going to get there, don't get frustrated. Just go to a Division II or a division, or even an NAIA, get film, and then enter the transfer portal, because that's where
Yeah.
everybody's recruiting.
Yeah.
And it sucks. And I hope I came out a couple months ago before Tuberville put that whole thing in motion, or Saban or whoever, with the president. But I hope they stick to that. You got 5 years to play, 5 years. You can transfer one time at no cost, but after that, because that's the way it should be. Because
Yeah.
the NIL is going to be there, but it takes away the reason for transferring.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. And I just think, that we need to get some parameters around. Everybody's kind of saying the same thing. I just, for the sake of the game, for the sake of coaching, because again, coaches are making hasty decisions and there's just no time to really be a football coach anymore. You're a free agent signing recruiter, trying to gel a team in 8 months to get ready for a season, and it's a new team every year. It just doesn't bode well on the profession. It doesn't help the young men as far as having to be resilient and learn how to deal with adversity. It doesn't help. Yeah, it's putting money in their pockets, but it's not helping the development of young people. No way.
and it does, and it directly affects your culture as a college program, because like we've talked about on here before, like, it's gone from building a culture and the older guys telling the younger guys, hey, this is how we do it here, that's not what we do, to it being an instant culture where there aren't a whole lot of older guys to do that anymore. So you're, as a coach, you don't even know it, but you're constantly trying to reinforce that. I mean,
Yes.
we have a mutual friend, a couple of them, and a guy that you worked for, um, was coaching at an SEC
Mhm.
school, and he was a coordinator, and then he became a head coach, which he is now. And he told me one time, he said he'd go in the locker room and he spent the majority of his time managing players saying they're not going to practice because they're getting paid $500,000 a year and they don't want to get hurt. Arguments going on, putting fires out all the time in the
Yeah.
locker room.
Yeah.
And that's happening a lot, man.
Yeah. It's a little toxic, and I think again, uh, is it affects chemistry. I don't care who you are. When Joe Schmo's making X amount of bucks and you're competing, you're showing up every day and they're not, and or they may not be good enough to earn those dollars. It affects team chemistry. I don't care who you are. So there's a lot of different things that coaches are juggling at all the levels, in my opinion. And so, you know, extra special shout out to those who can get a team to bond in those short periods of time to compete as a team, because it's just difficult.
So how important, well, I know how important it is, but talking about culture, it doesn't matter when you come in as a head coach. I mean, things are going to be done your way, right? And there can be some great things culturally that were in
Mhm.
place that you may change or adjust or adapt. And then there can be, and I've been in a situation where I walked in and there was no culture, or the culture was there was no culture. And so you build it from the ground up, and you may implement some good things that was in the lack of culture. But how imperative is it for you to, and what have you guys been doing to really create a culture that you want and that your assistant coaches want, that benefits the kids, the school, the community?
Yeah. One thing is just showing up. You know, you got to show up, be consistent in your message and your delivery. For us, these kids that I'm coaching now, I'm their third coach in the last 2.5 years. And so, you're just trying to make sure you show up, you be consistent in what you're asking them to do. Accountability is one of the things that we're stressing. They had the culture where I was told that kids wouldn't show up to practice, or they'll show up late to practice, or they didn't have, certain things that they would do that they felt would help them be, conducive to a winning culture. So when those things are all from the top, they're watching you, and they're watching your message. And are you going to be disciplined with the things you say? Hey, here's what we stand for now. And so I've had some guys that are my leaders show up and say, "Man, coach, we really like where we're going." So I try to listen to them. Yeah, I know what I want, but I try to lean into those guys that have been the leaders to say, you know, how is this compared to the way you used to do it? Or what do you think about this? So I don't just think everything works that I want to work or that I want to implement. I ask for a little bit of feedback from those guys that have earned a little bit of trust from me, as far as
Right.
showing up consistently and working hard and taking coaching. But same applies to the coaches, right? I kept some guys on staff, because I don't come from the high school ranks. So I don't know a lot of coaches to hire this year, but I kept a few guys. And so they were part of that culture, right? That was kind of toxic, where there was arguing and infighting and all this. But I say, hey, I think these guys did a fairly good job of holding the team together in the absence of a head coach. And so I felt like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna give these couple guys a shot to be on my staff. Even with these guys, there's still some things that they're used to
Mhm.
that I've had to try to talk to them about, and that I've tried to help bring them along with. And we're still working through those things. But it's amazing that, again, what certain coaches think is coaching is so far from what I identify as a coach. And again, I know I've been at a higher level of coaching, but I also try to make sure that I'm responsible for their development as coaches and their organization as coaches. So I try to coach my coaches, is what I'm saying, because it's not just about me. I think if I'm doing the job right, I should be growing my coaches and making them better coaches, just like I am the players.
So, and obviously that's, I mean, the people that we grew up around, that kind of framed our coaching principles and
Yes.
philosophy and stuff like that. I know that the really good people that I was always around aligned the staff, right? We were always in alignment. And I think at the college and pro level, you can sit in a staff room and argue and quite honestly MF each other, but then when you walk out, you're good. You guys are good. It was a professional disagreement, whatever. But at the high school level, it tends to be a lot harder because the egos are different. They're not better, they're not worse, they're just different, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, a lot of high school coaches don't have the experience that you have, that I had, and
Yes.
so their mindset isn't the same, and that's not wrong, right or wrong. It's just different. So, and the other thing, and I think you'll agree with this, the best coaches we were around empowered their assistant coaches, but they empowered them because we all spoke the same language, um, and we were aligned as a staff. So,
Yeah.
you know, how do you bring in a bunch of guys from a previous staff, your own guys, and make sure that you empower those coaches and make sure that number one, first and foremost, they're aligned. They have to be aligned in order to be empowered. So how are what are some things you think are important to do with your staff in that regard?
Communication. I communicate. I was of the mindset growing up that if you communicate things with me, I can handle it. I could deal with it. But there's nothing worse than, nonverbals or assuming. Like, no, no, no. I try not to operate in the gray. I stay out of the gray. I communicate with my coaches. I talk to them about expectations. Think, like you said, the alignment thing is been critical. All the staffs, most of the staffs I've been on, that's been really good and helpful from an alignment. I think I can only recall of maybe one that really jumps out at me where we weren't aligned. Uh, and that was a bad experience for me. Bad, or two, I say two. Those two were probably the worst experiences I had because again, the alignment was off. You had different agendas. You had people going for certain things that they felt was bigger than the team. So I say all that to say, for me now, I just make sure I over communicate my expectations of what I expect from them as coaches, as mentors. Um, I got a staff meeting tonight to go a little bit more into some of those details with my guys. Here's a point I wanted to make. You talked about empowering. Coach Ankney, if you recall, when I was a GA, he gave me a position to coach.
To
I
coach.
was a
Yeah, I
Sam
remember that.
linebacker coach, so I coached
Yep.
one guy. That did wonders for me. I mean, wonders. As a young coach getting into a profession where you don't know anything about it or a position that you played. So I took I had a meeting room that he let me meet with them. I had things that I learned from John where I was able to put together practice plans and individual drills and, leaned on Ricky for certain things from a linebacker standpoint. So that was empowering because now the guys didn't feel like I was a paper pusher or just a guy who getting the scripts together. So I try to make sure that I give coaches responsibility. Hey, you got my strength and conditioning. I oversee these things, but I try to give them certain things that I hold them responsible for and try to help guide them along. Hey, if you could maybe do this a little bit better or trim the fat here so I try to help, but I want to give them responsibility. So it's not just my voice that
Right.
they move to.
Right. Well, that's good, man. We could go on and on. I think I'm going to end DC on you know, leadership is so important, right? And every kid is a leader, whether they know it or not, or even embrace it or not. And I think, especially with the younger kids at the high school level, the embracing part of being a leader is very difficult because you got guys that think they're leaders that all they do is talk and aren't leaders because no one listens to them because they're not treating others the right way. And so how have you identified your leaders thus far?
Interesting. Observation again. I didn't know any of them, right? So you have to observe those that are showing up ahead of time, right? Those that are staying after, those that are really out front and just doing it by example. Because you're right, you could be fooled by the vocal leaders, right? That could sway you one way or the other. But just being observant with time and then having meetings with certain kids and watching how they conduct themselves. And so I've had a couple guys that have been leaders like we want by example, right? But now those leaders by example are now starting to lead with their vocals as well. And they're
Good.
holding kids accountable to, hey, skipping reps in a lift or not pushing themselves or not straining like they should. And so those are the guys that have started to separate themselves over the past couple months for me. That I know I go to them now and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or, I got these three things I'm thinking about for our mantra or our motto for the season. So I'm giving them some ownership, but I'm also leaning on them to say, hey, this guy hadn't been showing up. You may want to check in on him, right? So just finding, different things that I, didn't have as a player at times, right? I was more of the example guy than the rah-rah guy. I was going to show you I was a leader by how I played, and when I was able to go out there and do that, I felt like that was enough. But knowing what I know now, I wish I was more of a vocal guy, because guys leaned on my ability to get out there and compete at a high level. And so I think it's okay to push those guys that may not be the vocal guys, that are your guys who are doing all the things right, but may be afraid to step out of that shell. I try to help support that and let them know it's okay.
Well, don't I'm just gonna tell you from firsthand experience, your leadership abilities and the way you led, um, far exceeded what you're saying here. I'll tell you that.
Mm,
The thing
mm,
I remember about you is you're right. You had the mindset of I'm gonna lead by the way that I play and my intensity and all that kind of stuff,
yeah,
which it absolutely did. But DC, when you said something, you should have seen people straight. I mean, you had no idea, but people straightened up.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
They
yeah.
straighten and
That's
that includes Bo,
yeah.
who was that underskilled
Mhm,
safety with you
mhm.
back there
Yeah,
and was a leader, but completely different because
yeah.
when you spoke, which you did at the right times,
Right, right.
people straightened up and they listened.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I felt like
so
I had
that
to defer sometimes, because of
right.
older
Absolutely.
guys and not being, so like you said, I wish I understood that better the way I do now. But thank you for that, because yeah, you
Yeah,
just
no.
don't know sometime. And I didn't notice it. I just knew I felt like if I needed to say something, I was to a point where I didn't want it anymore. Like I'm giving everything I got. Why you slacking, or why we slacking? Why aren't we all united in what we're trying to do? And so yeah, that's so cool to hear, man, because I just didn't know. I knew I was liked by many and not liked by many, but I knew when it came to football, there was nobody that was gonna really outwork or play me when we got between the lines. That was my mindset.
Well, and the last thing I'll say
Yeah.
is that those younger guys that I think came in your senior year, Harold
Yeah.
Piercy,
Yeah.
Caldrenoff Easter,
Yeah.
both of those guys were the 2 starting safeties for us for a long time, 3
Yeah.
or 4 years, and had it not been for you, they wouldn't have and if they were on here and we asked them,
Yeah.
they would admit to them they were both Caldrenoff
Oh,
was
yeah.
great, and they and HP was great, and they were
Yeah.
different,
Yeah.
but having those 2 guys in the back end and learning from you and
Yeah.
watching you do it the way you did it,
Yeah.
um, you did exactly what leaders are supposed to do,
Yeah.
so
And I felt that. It's so cool because I felt that in watching them and talk and they shared those things with me. And so I knew, I may have been a little late, but I was right on time from a leadership standpoint, especially by what I left to the staff and to Mizzou with those guys coming in behind me. So I do know that that's when I did recognize it as a coach and watching them be able to play. I was like, yeah, I did it right. I may have
yeah,
been
you did.
late, but I did it right.
Hey, brother, I appreciate it,
Yeah,
love you lots, miss
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Um, we'll just hang on for a sec, but thank you
Okay.
very much,
Cool. Love you too,
and
man. Appreciate you and support you in all you're doing. You will make a difference. I'm like you. It's not a matter of if, it's when. So I support you. Can't wait to see it all happen.
Lee Summit North High School, Kansas City, Missouri, not
There we
Kansas.
go.
You're gonna do great things, but just hang
Thank you.
on a sec, okay?
Okay.
Thanks,
Yeah.
DC.